Hey guys, I'm the Genie here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. And if you end up enjoying this full movie review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel. And fourth to my Discord server, where you can join, chill, and content, and do all that cool stuff. And chilling will be reminded at the end of the review. With all that out of the way, let's get into Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. So obviously I've seen the trailer for this for actually quite some time before getting into it. Now, obviously there was a controversy that even I was aware of before this movie even came out. For those of you who do not know, Dungeons and Dragons, or the people behind it, or the higher-ups at Wizards of the Coast, I believe, someone in the higher-ups decided that they were going to update the terms of service, or the rules, essentially, of said game. It was essentially going to make the game less accessible, and essentially it was going to force the hands of certain creators within Dungeons and Dragons to essentially have a lot less to work with, and potentially have their work even potentially get taken or something or other along those lines. So I had heard rumors that boycotts don't work for games. So, the fans of Dungeons and Dragons, boycotted once one person heard of this news, of these updates, and leaked it out. And once this knowledge was known to the general public, Twitter and the players among the Dungeons and Dragons stormed out and boycotted and removed their services from D&D Beyond, which is where they were seeking to see where they can see how much money they were getting. And since boycotts don't work, this boycott worked, actually, as it would turn out, because you see, when enough people actually boycott a popular thing that's making money, and money is the thing that makes every decision happen. The people behind Dungeons and Dragons, the higher ups at least, they quickly spun around and begged for forgiveness, and turned back some of those decisions, essentially. There were even people willing to boycott this movie as a added addendum to said boycott, and indeed I was considering being among those people. However, since the boycott already worked, here we are. Now, of course, on the other hand of me considering whether or not to review this movie, there's also the other hand of me also doing my job as a reviewer, and as a, paid by one person, Patreon supported person, or / PayPal supported person, and this being a part of my, again, job, as it were, quote unquote. But this isn't something I was paid to do. Nonetheless, that's irrelevant, as I just thought I'd go over some of the things that led up to this movie. Now, I heard some other rumor about the males in this movie being demasculated from some conservative people that heard that from somewhere. I'm not really sure where this came from. So I was wondering what that was in reference to in the actual movie, in the context, what actually happens in the movie. Are all the males demasculated? Are they all demasculated or whatever? At least one of them has a badass fighting scene, so I'm not really sure what that's a reference to, if that's the case. I mean, that's already not all, so that premise is broken by one, at the very minimum. It also depends on what they mean by, well, what is masculinity? What is manly in 2023? I don't know, right? Perception is a lot of what drives certain people, and certain people have some more old school ways of thinking of what masculinity is and what femininity is. And it's not like there's a third thing called gender neutrality. No, no, no. Pretend that doesn't exist. Because binary. Anyway, so I decided to give this movie a proper watch and see what actually the plot and story and all these characters are about, and review it as objectively as possible. That means, yes, despite the things I just talked about, reviewing this movie still as fairly as possible. So, with all of that preamble out of the way, the movie does begin in a snowstorm, where we see our lead character or we see this garrison filled with people, and we see that two of these prisoners are brought in. We meet our two lead main characters, Holga and Edgin, or as I'll refer to him in my notes and on this rest of the review, just simply Ed. So, they are currently in prison, and a new prisoner is flung among them. And this creature, I forget what it is. I think it's like a orc or something that's like trying to flirt with Olga, in quotation marks. And that doesn't work out too well. We then cut to the two of them cutting some ice, for whatever reason. I don't know why they do this up there, but I don't know. And so we then cut to him in the front of this council, and she's sort of in the background as he's telling about his backstory, about how he had a wife and a daughter, and how he used to be someone of justice, like his family name, and used to live up to honor. Now, based on the Dungeons and Dragons characters, he does have an instrument, which, even when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, he must be a bard, because bards typically, at least in Dungeons and Dragons, play the instrument. Now, he does technically play a song or two during this, but he doesn't do much else with that. So we can talk about that as we progress. Hoga herself, her class is obviously a barbarian fighter of sorts, just by the way she fights and carries herself. However, back to our backstory of our main character. So he has a daughter, but as we see his progressing of the story, we see that a bunch of raiders took revenge on his plight and killed his wife in the process. And due to this, he cut out his oath of justice, or whatever it was exactly. So, with the assistance of Holga, the two of them began to do some robbing. And eventually along the way, Simon the Sorcerer was picked up among the crew. He's the one on the lower left of the poster. And the Red Wizard, Zolfina, the one at the top left there, at the very top left, wanted to be there, essentially. Now, I'll be honest, there's this character named Forge, and I don't know what class he's supposed to be, in all honesty. Yeah, I really don't know. I watched this movie very carefully. I just know he's an antagonist, so keep that in mind at the very most. But our main character learns of a resurrection spell, and it requires a very special item. And he was initially heading out to go get that, to bring his wife back. However, upon just bringing it back up, it had a tripwire trap attached to it, and thus the wizard had to kill a bunch of people to try and protect him. And they were all frozen temporarily based off of what the flashback was indicating. However, our lead character, done with his flashback, says that he has gone through this, but he was waiting on one character in particular named Jonathan. Jonathan is a bird-type creature, I believe. Not a kenku, but, or a cockra, I believe is what they're called in Dungeons and Dragons, the ones that can fly. So Jonathan, the Orococra, comes in, and once he's in the middle of the room, Ed and Holga grab onto him and push him through the window of this tower, and they begin to have him fly so that they can fumble their way to safety. And thus our title crawl commences. We then cut back to see that the two of them have made it elsewhere, and as they're mentioning where they're going to head, they mentioned a place called Baldur's Gate. For those unfamiliar with anything in Dungeons and Dragons, Baldur's Gate's probably one of the OG original locations, probably, if I have any recollection of that. That's definitely been in the names of one of the iconic names of Dungeons and Dragons for ever, essentially. And they see that now that it has been 2 years since our title crawl, Forge has been a little bit more successful in his outings. And yeah, we do learn that, again, it's been 2 years. So, they go to a location where they meet his daughter, and at this point the daughter refers to Forge as Uncle Forge, so that is how long they have been together, essentially. Because Forge was the one looking after her. And Zofina is there as well. Now, this is where we see how clearly of an antagonist Forge is, as he lies about what Ed was trying to take in the process to the daughter. And in the process of trying to get some quick revenge, they are quickly set into a trap by the Red Wizard into quicksand, and that's the other name of Zofina, the Red Wizard, as I'll refer to her at certain points. So the two of them are caught, so they're brought to outside to be dispatched. So they're led to this guard who tells them to get on their knees so he can axe swing down and get them over with. However, Holga, being a person of the blade, uses that knowledge to her advantage, distracting the guard with the weapon he's wielding to essentially stall for time so that she can hoist up a brick and attack with it and essentially escape using that initial brick to attack and make her way out of her shackles. Meanwhile, Ed is struggling on his own while she does a good chunk of the work. Not gonna deny that, but he does take one of them out at the very most. So Forge doubles down on his lie and tells that the tablet and that he left to go essentially, just go away, essentially. And that's not even close to what he was trying to do. In the process of escaping, they make their way to Simon, and Simon's doing some pretty basic with simple illusions, and people are bored, but Sneaky, sneaky, Simon is trying to take some money in the background. However, the two of them cut in his show, and the people catch on that he's trying to steal. So he uses this gravity device spell a few times, and that allows him to escape with the two of them, and they escape via horses. He mentions the two of them, or Ed mentions that they probably need someone, a druid specifically, to essentially turn into any animal to help them out, and if anyone knows of anyone. So Simon pitches in, mentioning that he used to try to attempt to court with a druid named Doric, which is the woman on the lower right with the red hair and the horns. So she is a tiefling, tiefling druid. So yeah. Tieflings are usually referred to in Dungeons & Dragons, to those who've never played, are typically demon-esque, or like half demon or whatever. That's typically how I've seen tieflings be brought in. So yeah. So they go to her current location, and we see, as one woman's about to be executed, we see a horse turn into an owlbear. And this creature, you've probably seen it in all the trailers, because they showed a bunch. They actually tried to combine the combined features of an owl and a bear to make an owlbear, as it is, by name, to save said lady. I don't know who this lady is, but whatever. It's irrelevant, I guess. So they eventually join her, and she's a bit skeptical of humans, as she is a tiefling, as I just mentioned. And she's trying to gauge what Ed brings to the table, and he keeps saying that he's the planner of the group. And Doric goes over her own backstory and how her life was affected by what's going on with the people that they are mentioning here. We then cut to the Red Wizard, who speaks with this shadow. Now, who this shadow is a reference I'm not familiar with, and I'm not particularly sure this is Forge either, so I think there is a higher power, because I think that they were trying to set up a potential sequel, because I don't think they ever deal with this shadow anywhere in the movie, at least I'm not sure that they do. Anyway. So, Forge shows some people around as we cut back to him. All the while, we get these bizarre cuts to this bug that we see from time to time. And obviously, since I already mentioned this now, I should already just say it, the bug is clearly the druid. But, unfortunately, the wizard, being able to sense spells being cast, notices her with her magic, and tries to shoot at the little bug. So she tries to flee, turning into various different animals to great effect. She flies out at the end, turning into a bird. And then, as soon as she's in a building, turns into a tiefling, to the form we typically see her in. So yeah, she successfully escapes. All the while, she tells them of the door that that the thing that they are trying to steal is behind, by the way. They're trying to steal just the general gold from Forge, because he's the one that runs this entire area now. It's essentially the plot of the movie. So, basically, they need to open the door, but they don't have anything of access to open the door, and one of them mentions a helmet of something. I forget the official name of it, I do apologize. But it's essentially a helmet that can open the door. It's your MacGuffin of the movie, to put it another way. So, now that they have their fetch quest in need, uh, the wizard starts to make her own moves, seizing parts of the, I guess, capital area is what this area is. I forget what the area is actually called. I didn't write it down anywhere in my notes. But yeah, she's making her own moves. So, we then cut to Holga, who makes her way back to her homeland, or her husband, or ex-husband, I guess, because he's seeing somebody else, as we learn, named Gwyn. And when she exits out and is bummed, this is when we first see Ed play his first little piece of music to bolster her spirits and get her distracted to sing along. So then, they need to know where this helmet is, and some of them know that it's somewhere, but it's probably lost among these dead warriors. But fortunately for them, they do have a spell that Simon knows that can have him speak with the dead, which is a spell in Dungeons and Dragons, so it's very on brand, actually. So, in this, they get to ask a dead person 5 questions, and the 5 questions are asked. The dead person goes from reincorporated into life to going back to being dead. So, they ask. So this turns into a bit of a montage, as the first one they ask, he just answers questions immediately, so even if it was almost not even phrased as a question, he'll be like, yeah, that's a thing, and then he's like, so, like, it almost feels as if, like, the first one was, like, someone who's been resurrected before and knows all too well what this is, and is trying to get out of it as soon as possible. So, they have to go through quite a bit of people, like 2 others, or even 3. And through it, they learn about this flashback with this dragon named Raycor, and how this helmet was spread along. They eventually learn that this guy, whose name I cut it down to simply Zin, he's the guy with the sword, he's a paladin. Sin, that's not his full name, by the way. Again, I just cut it down for my notes. Sin proceeds. We then cut to Sin saving a baby kitten creature. I believe these are called kitsune. I think that's what the cats are called. Or that could be a fox. So I forget what the cats are called, I think. Sorry, D&D lore. Oh, tabaxi. Sorry. I think these are supposed to be tabaxi creatures. They don't look great, I'm gonna be honest. I think they're being puppeteered by their movements. It looks like it anyway, because they move very unnaturally, and they look a little bit off in the finalization of this movie. I'll be completely real there. Anyway, he goes into his backstory, and he's very, again, we saw him run through his own unholy battle, and run from for his dear life as a child. And he gets, when Ed and his group meet up with him, Zin gets him, Ed, the main character, to swear that he will give money back to the people of Winterland. I believe it's what it's called. Winterland. Something like that. And he tells them that he hid the helmet in a place in the Underdark, which is another common location in Dungeons and Dragons. So now our party has their location, so they proceed to go there. But they are being watched in the distance. We learn as they're traveling that Sin's perception is incredibly high. That's a joke in Dungeons and Dragons, I'm guessing. As we hear him hear everything that the main character is saying about him. It's almost as if you rolled a natural 20. I don't know. That's an auto success for those of you who don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, by the way. Anyway, Simon stepped onto the bridge, and you probably saw this little bit on the poster, or the trailer, trailer, and the bridge collapses. So, they're trying to find a way across, and Holga is working her way through what she's grabbed from her home, and she just so happened, conveniently, and to move the plot back along, she just so happened to bring a staff along that allows them to teleport from one location to another. So it's a portal staff, essentially. So Simon is able to use it to help them out. However, they are not alone anymore, as they're now being followed by these bald assassin guys. And as I already mentioned, Zin, the paladin, has his one bit of taking all of them out. But since they're like undead, I guess, I think they just all come back at some point. However, their unfortunes increase some more as a fat dragon comes out and starts to chase them, so they obviously begin to run, and when they have enough space to do it, they use the portal thing again. Sin, seeing Ed in trouble, stabs the dragon in the head, but is unable to find a killing blow on it, with even a stab like that. And once they are all trapped, as they're like running into like deeper into the cave, and like water is filling the room, Ed tells them all to essentially hit underwater, while Simon is told to cast a flame ball spell as soon as the flaming dragon's mouth opens and shoot the little fire into the bigger fire, and thus would cause an implosion to the dragon, which is what we cut away as soon as he does it. So after they successfully escape, Sin is like, yeah, my job's here done. It's done. You have the helmet. I'm done. So he walks out of the movie. That's it. That's all he had to do. Anyway, Simon is the only one who can attune to the helmet as the sorcerer of the group, since this is like a magic-based thing. For those of you who don't know, typically attunement is like, you have to wait like 24 hours to typically put it on, but they add a little context and like backstory for him, where like his grandfather, like this greater sorcerer guy, is like preventing him from simply attuning too early, until he can like step up and prove that he's his own man, I guess, is like the whole bit here for him. So he's like kicked out every time he's starts doing this from this point, though. And this is his ancestor, by the way, not his like father. Anyway, so Ed is trying to recoup his group, as their morale is starting to sink, and in fact, Simon and Doric are getting ready to leave. So Simon says something about failure to the effect of like, oh, this isn't good, and Ed finally discloses to the rest of the group. I'm sure Holga already knew this, but he admits to everyone else at this point that he's essentially responsible for all the failures that have led up to here, including his wife, including the group, including essentially a lot of what has been going on. And this sort of hit sort of gets everyone else to be like, oh, this is actually pretty bad, and he's obviously trying to make amends for this thing. So they regroup, and they think of a really clever idea with the portal staff. Is that they think to put a new treasure, since they're trying to steal from the treasury, to put the portal gate on one of the pieces of treasure. So they put it on a portrait, and they place the portal on the portrait, and they place another portal on like a table. So every time, so think of it like the game Portal, and like you just go wherever the other end of the portal is essentially how this works. And my god, do they finagle the shit out of this. Like, they are just struggling to do this correctly. As, like, they get the portal on the portrait and they put it in the carriage that's being brought in, and Doric is, like, in there trying to, like, make sure, like, the portal is, like, closed so that way, they don't suspect that this is a portal treasure. But, like, Simon's, like, halfway through the portal, and, like, we see, like, the other group, like, halfway, as this treasury carriage is, moving by, and the guards are, like, looking at the rest of the party, and, like, Holga's like, you know, and, like, you see, like, half of Simon, being, like, shunted through the ground, and the other half of him is on the other end with Doric on the carriage side of it. So they manage to, again, finagle it so that the portal is covered, but there, and that Doric could get out successfully by turning into a bee and flying out. So they successfully do it. And in the process of them making sure that everyone's keeping up to code, Simon gives all of them sending stones. And thus our process of them trying to steal the treasury is underway, as we see Ed begin to play another song, as we see him move towards these two guards. But this version of Ed is a fake illusionary spell that Simon is casting. But Simon gets a little stuck and the guards catch on. So Holga starts to hold them off. All the while, Doric and... yeah, actually it's just Doric. She's alone in this. She's trying to chip away at the table, because what happened was the portal portrait that they put ended up on the floor, meaning that if they went through the portal like this, they would hit the floor like this. So she had to chip away at the floor, and to turn into a creature small enough to wiggle her way inside is essentially what she's trying to do. So, all this while, Simon is getting desperate. He attempts to attune to the helmet again while things are getting dicey. He hits his ancestor, tells him he's his own man, So he attunes, excuse me. So the door opens. And Doric also simultaneously, or near the same time, slips in. However, she ends up somewhere else, and so does he. We see Doric get knocked out first, and Simon and Helga get caught. And we see our main character talking with his daughter after he meets her again. But, excuse me, but this is a trick from the Red Wizard, as she also captures him. Now, this is where our movie gets incredibly stupid. The Red Wizard has him, and even Forge just says, you should just kill him. And the Red Wizard, for whatever reason, is suddenly like, oh, give him a chance in this little test thing you have going on. Because Forge, for his little city that he now runs, is like running this gauntlet. So yeah, that was silly of her to suddenly be like this. So yeah, they're allowed to all compete. So they're all moved there with these little bracelets that don't allow them to use any of their magic or spells. And thus, this jaguar thing that can, like, cast illusionary spells, I forget what the name of this is. It's a very dangerous enemy in Dungeons & Dragons, though. I know that for sure. And it begins, like, hunting them. All the while they are in this maze as a part of this test. And we see, like, these two other squads that are with our main squad, all running from this creature, because none of them have weapons, and they all have their spells locked too. And there are chests that have weapons in them, so they're having forced to pick up these items. However, the one Holga opens happens to be what's called a mimic. Mimic, for those of you who don't know, is again a very iconic Dungeons & Dragons creature. Mimic pretends to be an object, in this case a treasure chest, and is actually a creature in disguise. So Doric comes to the rescue for her in that little moment. However, as they are running through, Doric almost gets caught in a cube of jello. But as she pulls her way out, her cufflink comes off. And Holga makes sure to point that out to her. And our team reunites at some point. So, she has a clever idea now that she can use her spell, and that is to force all of them to jump into the cube. And by the way, some other guy jumped into the cube way earlier, I guess. And we see that at this point the cube is acidic. I forget what this creature is called. It's like, it has like a different name, but I don't remember exactly what it's called. So yeah, it's an acidic cube, essentially. So they're very not keen on this idea, but she tells them all to jump into the cube. So they do so, as the jaguar tries to chase at them. She then shifts into a snake and slithers her way out, and up, like, the other side of the cube. She then persists to pull out someone else, and then they all pull each other out, and they have a little bit of acidic burn, but they're all fine otherwise. And all of their gauntlets are gone, question mark? Which leads to a big plot hole later on in the movie, I'm pretty sure, so we'll get there. Among other problems with the ending of this movie, and we'll get there. Anyway, so, all this while, they manage to escape all the way to the docks, and Simon and the daughter get there to see them all on the boat. And he's like trying to tell her that the key is for like the resurrection, and she's not believing in her father anymore at this point. But due to what actually no, this is actually where this is where she learns of the truth of what Simon is capable of. Sorry, not Simon. Forge is capable of, and that included threatening her herself. I didn't read that in my notes, but yeah, that's what happened. And thus she eventually gets out and joins her father, and they hug it out. Now, as our group is preparing to leave with the boat, they see dark clouds looming in the air back where they just escaped from, and we see that the Red Wizard is casting a dramatic spell of sorts. So, being the kind thieves that they are, they drop the money that is on the boat, because that's where they were transporting, that's where Forge was transporting the money on this boat, somewhere else. They use the portal thing that they still have, by the way. They drop the money into the portal towards the townspeople outside of the Colosseum, as the people inside the Colosseum aren't so lucky, as the Red Wizard's spell, forces them to die, essentially. So yeah, the Red Wizard sees this and spots them incoming. Our group is heading their way back. In the process of finagling to fight them off, she brings the statue back to life. And we see the owlbear, Doric, struggling to fight this off. And she is trying to move her way. Simon and her and the Red Wizard get into this magical hand fight where they both summon these magical hands, and they're like, Simon is kind of losing in this little debacle, and he's flung away. However, our team steps in and teams up, and she proceeds to do the time stop, because she was the one who was responsible for doing it the first time, if that wasn't obvious. However, this time around, they all show that they were all faking, as they all remove and show that they were not frozen. And we see that the daughter, who they did set up this portion of it where she was gifted a invisibility spell earlier in the movie, when she was a child, so she still has that. So we see her and the dad deal with that and her turning invisible earlier. However, she somehow gets a cuffling that works. I don't know where that came from, and I don't know why the daughter was a part of this plan, considering that earlier, when I just was talking about when they met earlier, he was like, stay here, or whatever. So, it feels like there's an entire scene or something missing here from that point to this point. Because, boy, does he transition quickly into, oh, by the way, we have a working cufflink, and, by the way, we got the daughter in on the plan somehow, between not trusting her to be invisible and now trusting her to be a part of the plan. Again, it feels like actually two scenes are missing from there. How they got the cufflink and how they got the daughter in on this little plan. But the cufflink was enough to dispel her, just as it dispelled everyone else, as I mentioned, though. So this allows Doric to pummel her in owlbear form. However, Hoga was not so lucky. She ended up getting jabbed by a particular item that's very dangerous and dies. The daughter's distraught by this, so Ed uses the key that he got, the resurrection key thing, and brings Holga back, and the key evaporates because it's a one-use item. And so they capture the Red Witch or Killer. I actually don't know which they do. It cuts away, or it I think it does at this point, and we see Simon asking out Doric yet again and getting that little jaunt of a yes. And we see Zin again finding Forge, and then we cut to Forge being the one at the court hearing. And this time, he's the one to try to grab Jonathan, the bird. But this time, the window is sealed up, so he's unable to use their tactic of using poor Jonathan, and thus Forge's plans are wielded unsuccessful. And that was Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. So I will say, despite this movie's odd thing about whatever it was saying, I would say 2/3 of this are actually pretty good. The third ending segment I did have a few issues with. Again, having those few missing segments of how they planned this final plan, how they got the cufflink, because that essentially what saves the day here, is that, considering they all went through the cube, so I'm pretty sure they all lost their cufflinks again. So I shrug and say, I don't know where they got that cufflink from. So yeah, a bit of convenience and even plot holes in this movie as well that definitely prevent it from being a full, solid movie. However, I do acknowledge, like I was saying, that I do think like the setup of this movie was handled fairly well. So I think I'm gonna go with like a 5 out of 10. I think this movie is actually somewhat in between being a really solid movie. Again, a lot of proper setup, but the ending half is where everything kind of breaks apart. And I do think like just building it up a little bit more, having a bit more time, filling out those segments to explain some of those elements, how they got the cufflink, how they informed the daughter of the plan in conjunction with earlier in the movie where the father was like, stay here. Those little bits would have helped to help iron out the third section of the movie, because those two things are way too vital not to be answered in this movie. So yeah, that's why I'm dropping it to a 5 out of 10. So it's a halfway decent movie. So yeah, all in all, somewhere in the middle. And I've, as someone who has played Dungeons and Dragons for a while now, by the way, if you've come this far into my review, please feel free to head over to the Six Striders channel and watch me run a campaign as well as me be a player, if that's something you're interested in. But I always felt like Dungeons and Dragons as its own thing would make for a much better series than a movie anyway. Sort of like a why'd I say horse? What's the series I'm thinking about? Not Lord of the Rings, not that one, the other one. I've never watched it, so I'm blanking on the name. The one that got really bad. House of the Dragon, that's it. Having a series like that, but I know that's not like the official name of it, but that's like the new one, House of the Dragon. I don't know, I think like Dungeons and Dragons, I think that would be way better suited for like a long-term series, and like having like a proper adventure, having like really fleshing out, that way you can really flesh out the characters and all of them, and have your party actually built up that way, and have the threat be properly established and have it be a grand adventure, like a proper series, um, in universe instead of people playing the game, um, which has been done in other shows, such as Stranger Things. I'm familiar with it, obviously. But I think something like this, in a series format, I think would yield significantly better payoffs and setups and all that good stuff. And yeah, that's my full review of Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. If you ended up enjoying that full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel. And fourth to my Discord server, where you join and chill your own content for free. And until next time, everyone, bye bye.